It was a cool autumn evening when I found myself standing outside the small, dimly lit cafe in downtown Chicago. My hands were buried deep in my jacket pockets, and I couldn't help but stare at the building across the street, my family's house, or at least what was left of it. The place I had spent the first 23 years of my life. The place I had been raised and shaped. Now it seemed like nothing more than a distant memory. Everything changes. I whispered under my breath, the words almost foreign to me as they slipped out. I had been living on my own for 6 months now, ever since the fight that tore my family apart. It had started like any other argument, heated words exchanged, accusations thrown around, and then, of course, silence. I had walked out of that house, suitcase in hand, feeling like I was finally breaking free. But now, standing here, all I could feel was uncertainty. "You're just like your father." My mother had yelled that night, her face twisted in anger. "Always running away from your problems." I had tried to explain, tried to tell her that I couldn't stay in a place that felt suffocating anymore, but her words had cut through me like a knife. "You're nothing but a disappointment," she'd added. That was the last thing I heard before the door slammed behind me. Funny how the things we hear growing up stick with us. Funny how they become the things we believe about ourselves. And yet, here I was, standing on the edge of something new, of something that could be mine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had fought for was slipping through my fingers. I had spent so long trying to prove my worth to my family, to prove I wasn't just the quiet, invisible one who always did what was expected. But in the end, nothing had changed. The door to the cafe creaked open behind me, snapping me out of my thoughts. I turned to find my best friend Jake, standing there, looking at me with that concerned look I had come to expect from him over the years. "You okay?" he asked, his voice laced with the same quiet worry that always seemed to follow me around these days. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "Yeah, just thinking." Jake stepped closer, his eyes scanning the street before meeting mine. "You know, you don't have to do this alone. You're not alone, all right?" I smiled weakly, though it didn't reach my eyes. "I know. It's just complicated." He didn't say anything, but the silence between us was comfortable, as if he understood more than he was willing to admit. Jake had always been the one to pick up the pieces when things fell apart, and I had always been the one to push him away. That night, as we sat in the cozy booth of the cafe, sipping on coffee and watching the world go by, I couldn't help but wonder. What happens when you finally stop being the one who holds everything together? What happens when you walk away from the people who've been the center of your life, and you finally get the space to breathe? For so long, I had told myself that everything would be okay, that my family would eventually understand. But as the months passed, it became clearer that things would never be the same. Jake leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on his cup. "You know, it's okay to feel lost. It's okay to not have everything figured out. No one does." "That's easy for you to say," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've got your life together. Your parents are proud of you." Jake laughed, though it was a bit too loud for the quiet of the cafe. "Trust me, they've got their issues too. Everyone does." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Really? You never talk about it?" Jake shrugged, a casual motion that didn't quite hide the weight in his eyes. "It's not always about the big stuff. Sometimes it's the little things that get to you." And that was the thing, wasn't it? The little things. The things that build up over time until you can't breathe under the weight of them anymore. I stared out the window at the flickering streetlights, the cold air settling around me. It wasn't just the fight with my parents that was weighing on me. It wasn't just the tension, the distance that had grown between us. It was the realization that maybe, just maybe, I had been living for someone else my whole life. My family, my parents, trying to be everything they wanted me to be. What would happen if I stopped? Maybe I need to stop trying to be everything for everyone, I said, more to myself than to Jake. Maybe I need to be okay with just being me. Jake gave me a sideways glance, the corners of his mouth curving up slightly. There it is, the real you. I smiled, but the doubt lingered, like a shadow that refused to fade. Would being just me be enough? Would it make me happy? Or would it make me feel more alone than ever before? The thought sat with me for the rest of the evening, as Jake and I made small talk and the hours slipped by unnoticed. But as I got up to leave, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't sure if it was the coffee, the conversation, or just the quiet of the night, but I finally felt like I had made a choice, one that didn't involve anyone else. And as I stepped out into the chilly night air, I knew that whatever came next, I had to trust that it was the right decision. The next few days passed in a blur. I was working at the same job I'd held since I was 18, waiting tables at a small bistro in the heart of the city. The job itself wasn't bad, but it had become a routine that felt more like a cage with each passing day. The money was enough to get by, but every time I looked at my paycheck, a gnawing feeling in my gut reminded me that I wasn't living the life I wanted. And yet, it was comfortable. It was safe. But that wasn't the reason I had walked out on my family. I hadn't left because things were comfortable. No, I had left because I wanted something more. Something real. And now that I was standing on my own, with no one to lean on, the weight of that decision was beginning to feel heavier than ever. I hadn't talked to my mom or dad since the night I walked out. I had tried, in the beginning, to reach out. A text here, a phone call there. But each time I called, the silence on the other end was deafening. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. I knew they were disappointed in me. But what did they expect? Did they think I would just stay and let my life slip away, caught in a cycle of unspoken expectations and hidden resentments? I had always been the good child, the one who followed the rules, who kept my head down and did what I was told. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in trying to be what they wanted me to be. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that their dreams for me were my own. But then, as I stood in front of the cafe that evening, something shifted in my gut. I was trying to convince myself that my decision was the right one, but the truth was, I was scared. Scared of being alone, scared of failing, scared of everything I had left behind. That's when I saw him. Caleb. Caleb had been a friend of mine in high school. We hadn't stayed close after graduation, but we kept in touch here and there. He was the kind of guy who always had a plan, who always seemed to know exactly where he was going. I used to admire that about him, but now, standing across from me in the fading light of the street, he seemed different. There was something in his eyes, a look of someone who had seen too much, who had learned the hard way that life didn't always go as planned. "Hey, Chloe," Caleb said, his voice low. "Long time no see." I smiled politely, though I could feel the awkwardness in the air between us. "Hey, Caleb, how've you been?" Same old," he replied, though there was a tiredness in his tone that didn't match his usual confident demeanor. "Listen, I've been thinking a lot about you lately." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Oh? Why's that?" "Well, I heard about what happened with your family," he said, looking me in the eyes. "And I know we haven't really talked since high school, but I just wanted to say, I get it." I swallowed hard, unsure of where this conversation was going. "You get it?" Caleb nodded, his gaze intense. "Yeah. I know what it's like to feel like you're suffocating under someone else's expectations. I've been there. But sometimes when you make that break, it costs more than you think." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. What did he mean by that? What cost was he talking about? Before I could respond, Caleb continued. "I know you're probably thinking about going back to them, your family, maybe trying to fix things. But you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth giving up the life you've started to build for something that might never change? I was taken aback. Caleb wasn't wrong. Part of me did want to go back. Part of me missed the comfort of my old life, even if it had been suffocating. But Caleb's words were planting seeds of doubt in my mind. What if it wasn't worth it? What if going back meant losing everything I had worked for? The silence stretched between us for a long moment. Caleb was waiting for an answer, though I didn't know what to say. I had already made the decision to leave. But could I really live with that decision forever? Look, I know this might sound harsh, Caleb said, breaking the silence. But life doesn't wait for you to figure it out. You have to make a choice, and it's going to cost you either way. So you have to decide what you're willing to pay. The weight of his words settled in my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the sting of doubt. Caleb stepped back, his hands in his pockets. I've got to go, but I just wanted to say, don't make the mistake of looking back and wondering what if. It's too late for that. The only way forward is to keep going, no matter how hard it gets. I nodded, watching him walk away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. As I stood there alone, I realized that Caleb was right. There was no going back, not to my family, not to the life I had left behind. The decision I had made was irreversible, and now I had to live with the consequences. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to find my own way, no matter how difficult it might be. The days after Caleb's visit were a blur of confusion and quiet reflection. I spent hours after work sitting in the small apartment I rented, staring out the window at the city lights flickering like distant stars. The world outside felt so alive, so full of possibilities, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. I had left home for a reason. I wanted to be my own person, to escape the shadow of my parents' expectations and create my own future. But Caleb's words kept haunting me. It's gonna cost you, he'd said. And now I couldn't help but wonder if that cost was more than I was willing to pay. Was it worth it to leave everything behind for the sake of freedom? I kept thinking about the money. The small savings I'd managed to scrape together after moving out, the paycheck from the bistro, none of it was enough to give me the kind of life I dreamed of. I wanted more. I wanted to feel like I was living for something greater than just surviving. I had been looking at ways to make more money, side hustles, freelance gigs, anything that could get me ahead. But none of it felt secure. No matter what I tried, I kept hitting walls. Each new opportunity seemed to promise more than it could deliver. I couldn't help but feel like I was chasing something that didn't really exist. That's when I met Rachel. She was a friend of a friend, someone who had started her own business after getting out of a high-stress corporate job. She had it all figured out, or at least it seemed that way. Rachel was a self-made entrepreneur, someone who had carved out her own path and built a small empire doing something she loved. To someone like me, she was the picture of success, confident, driven, and unapologetically ambitious. "Hey Chloe," Rachel said with a smile when we met for coffee. "I've been hearing a lot about you lately. My friend Josh says you've got a lot of potential." I was caught off guard. Josh and I had worked together a few months ago, and I hadn't really talked to him since. But somehow, Rachel had heard about me, and she seemed interested. "Really?" "I mean, I guess I've been trying to figure things out," I replied, unsure of where this conversation was headed. Rachel leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "You know, I've been where you are. Stuck in a dead-end job, trying to make ends meet, trying to figure out how to make a real living. I had the same thoughts, wanting something more, something different. And then, I found a way out." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. I could feel the tension building, as if she was about to reveal some great secret to me. "How?" I asked, leaning in. Rachel smiled, almost like she knew what I was going to say. It's all about networking, knowing the right people. If you have the right connections, you can make money fast. You can get into a whole new world, one where you don't have to answer to anyone. I was intrigued but cautious. But, what do you mean? How does that work? Rachel shrugged casually. There are plenty of people out there who are looking for someone like you. You've got the drive, the potential, and you're not afraid to take risks. There's a lot of money to be made in the right circles. All you have to do is get in. Her words stirred something inside me, a mix of excitement and fear. Was this it? The opportunity I'd been waiting for? It felt like an answer to all the frustration I'd been dealing with. But there was a dark part of me that wondered if I was getting in over my head. What kind of circles? I asked hesitantly. Rachel leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I know people who trade in high-stakes deals. You make the right connections, you get in on the right transactions, and before you know it, you're making six figures. You just have to be willing to play the game. The risk is high, but the payoff is enormous. I wasn't sure if I was ready for something like that. It sounded like the kind of business where the rules weren't always clear, and where loyalty was a luxury that few could afford. But the temptation was undeniable. I thought about the money. I thought about the future I had dreamed of. No more waiting tables, no more scraping by. If this was the way to get there, was it worth the risk? Was I ready to jump into something that could change my life forever? Rachel was still watching me, waiting for my response. What do you think? She asked. I stared at my coffee cup, my mind racing. The freedom I wanted, the life I dreamed of, it was all within reach. But at what cost? Would I be sacrificing my integrity for the sake of success? Would I be willing to sell a piece of my soul just to live a life of luxury? I could feel the weight of that decision pressing down on me, but there was no denying the allure of what Rachel was offering. It was the kind of opportunity that didn't come around often. I had made a decision once before to leave everything behind for something better. Was this just another version of that decision? Okay, I said, finally meeting Rachel's gaze. Tell me more. It was funny how quickly things could change when you least expected it. Just a few weeks ago, I had been sitting in my small apartment, questioning whether I was ever going to get ahead. Now, I was meeting people I never imagined I'd even be in the same room with, getting caught up in conversations that felt a world away from the quiet life I once knew. It was as if I'd stepped into a new dimension where everything had a price tag, and nothing came without a cost. I started attending networking events with Rachel, these gatherings of entrepreneurs and investors, people who were constantly trading ideas, money, and power. The first few times, I felt out of place, like I was just a spectator, watching people who had figured it all out while I was still stumbling in the dark. But it didn't take long before I started to get the hang of things. I learned how to talk the talk, how to frame my story in a way that made me sound successful even when I wasn't. It was all about selling yourself, about convincing people that you were the next big thing, whether you were or not. Rachel showed me the ropes, introducing me to some of the most influential people in the room. I met Leo, an investor who had made millions in tech startups, and Vanessa, a marketing genius who'd helped turn small businesses into household names. They all had that same aura, self-assured, powerful, and never shy about letting you know it. But I was starting to see a pattern. The more they talked about their success, the more they hinted at the price they had paid for it. It was all about taking risks, making deals that could either make you a fortune or destroy everything you'd built. And the higher you climbed, the sharper the fall when things went wrong. But for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was exactly where I needed to be. One night, after a particularly high-stakes event, Rachel and I ended up at a private bar downtown. The atmosphere was dimly lit, with soft jazz music playing in the background. The type of place where people like us could talk shop without worrying about being overheard. "I'm glad you're getting the hang of it, Chloe," Rachel said, her voice low as she swirled her drink. "But I'm gonna be honest with you. This world, it's not for the faint of heart. You've gotta be willing to do whatever it takes to stay ahead. People will try to knock you down, steal your ideas, and take what's yours. But if you can't handle the pressure, if you hesitate for even a second, you'll be out." I watched her carefully. Her face was calm, but I could see the tension in her eyes. She wasn't just talking about the business, it was the life, the whole lifestyle that came with it. The late nights, the constant hustle, the deals that kept you awake at 3 a.m. wondering whether you'd made the right call. And then there was the darker side. The things you had to overlook, the compromises you had to make, just to stay in the game. "Do you think I can handle it?" I asked, not sure if I was asking her or myself. I wasn't sure what I was afraid of anymore, losing my integrity or losing the chance to be somebody. Rachel paused before answering, as though weighing her words carefully. "You've got the drive, Chloe. That's the most important part. The rest, you'll figure it out as you go. But remember, it's a game, and you've got to play to win." I nodded, but something inside me felt uneasy. I was being pulled deeper into this world, but the more I learned, the more I realized there were things I wasn't ready to see. The money, the power, it all came with strings attached. People who looked like they had it all together often had dark secrets they were hiding, and I was starting to wonder if I was ready to deal with them. Over the next few weeks, I began working with a few of Rachel's contacts, helping with some marketing campaigns for small businesses that had the potential to blow up. I was learning a lot about what made these companies tick and how you could use the right strategies to make them grow fast. But there was something about it that felt off. It was the kind of work that made you question where the line was drawn between clever marketing and straight-up manipulation. Sure, we were helping businesses succeed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were preying on people's insecurities. We were selling dreams, not products. And those dreams, as exciting as they were, had a cost. Sometimes, that cost was way higher than anyone anticipated. One evening, I was in a meeting with a new client, a man named Victor, who owned a small chain of boutique hotels. He had the kind of look that screamed money: sharp suit, expensive watch, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was here for a rebranding campaign, but the more we talked, the more I realized he was more interested in the image than the substance. "People want an experience, Chloe," he said, leaning back in his chair. "They don't care about the reality. They care about what we tell them it is. If you can sell them that, you can sell them anything, and I don't mind paying whatever it takes to make that happen." I sat there, trying to mask the unease creeping up my spine. Was this the kind of world I wanted to be part of? A world where the truth didn't matter, as long as the money kept rolling in? "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "We can do that. We'll make sure your brand is everywhere." But deep down, I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. It felt like I was losing sight of why I'd started this journey in the first place. I had come here to make something of myself, to build a future. But now, it was starting to feel like I was losing my soul in the process. As the night went on, I realized that I wasn't just selling brands, I was selling people's trust. And I wasn't sure if I was still the kind of person who could live with that. The days blurred together as I spent more time in this world, a world I was quickly becoming a part of, but one that didn't quite feel like mine. The meetings, the events, the constant race to stay ahead, it was starting to take a toll on me. I had to admit it. Rachel's warning was beginning to ring true. The more I got involved, the more I realized how deep the rabbit hole really went. I was on the phone with one of the investors I'd been working with, a man named Jason, who had been eyeing a project I was helping to market. It was a big deal, too big for me to mess up, but the stress of managing everything was weighing on me. "I don't care about your hesitations right now, Chloe." Jason's voice crackled through the speaker. "This is about results. We either make this work or we lose out. Understand?" I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to maintain my composure. "I understand. I'm on it." When I hung up, I let out a breath, my fingers trembling slightly. I was getting tired of pretending to have everything under control, tired of putting up this front that everything was fine when deep down I knew it wasn't. But I had to keep going. There was too much on the line. I glanced at my phone. A message from Rachel flashed on the screen. "Meeting at the club tonight. Be there at 9. Big things happening." I didn't even hesitate. I knew exactly what she meant. There were deals to be made, connections to be solidified, and conversations to be had. But was it worth it? Was the constant hustle, the pressure, the sleepless nights really worth the kind of success I was chasing? That night, I arrived at the club feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The flashing lights, the thumping bass, the glitzy crowd, all of it seemed so far removed from the person I used to be. The club had a different energy tonight. People weren't just socializing. They were making moves, cutting deals under the dim lights. Rachel was there, standing with a group of investors. She waved me over, her smile wide as always. But I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. We exchanged pleasantries, but she quickly got to the point. "We need you to push harder, Chloe," Rachel said, her voice low. "You've got potential, but you've got to prove it now. There's a new investor in town, and he's looking for someone to help take his project to the next level. But it's not just about the work. He wants to know if you've got the right mindset, if you're willing to go all in." Her words echoed in my head as she introduced me to a man named Alex. He was everything I had been told to expect. Sharp suit, calculating eyes, and a hand that gripped mine with a little too much force. "I've heard a lot about you," Alex said, his voice smooth and persuasive. "You've been making waves, but I want to know if you're serious. This isn't just about business, it's about power. You have to decide if you're ready to take the plunge." I didn't know how to respond at first. His words weren't just an offer, they were a challenge. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Take the deal, and I could finally reach the heights I'd been chasing. But at what cost? As the night wore on, I found myself getting pulled deeper into the conversation. It wasn't just about the project anymore. Alex wanted to know who I was, what made me tick, what I wanted out of life. But the more he dug, the more I started to question myself. Who was I becoming in this world? Was I losing sight of what mattered? Rachel was nearby, watching the interaction with a knowing look on her face. I could tell she was sizing up Alex, trying to figure out if this was the right move for me. But what Rachel didn't know was that I was starting to have my own doubts. I took a deep breath and met Alex's gaze. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firm, even though every part of me wanted to run. Alex's smile widened. "Good. I'll make the arrangements." But as I stood there, shaking his hand, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Was I really ready for this? Was I willing to sacrifice everything just for the chance at success? I excused myself and stepped outside for some air. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, and I couldn't stop myself from questioning everything I had done so far. What was I becoming? Was this the person I had always wanted to be? Or was I just playing a game that I didn't know how to win? I knew that the next few weeks were going to be pivotal. The decisions I made would shape my future, for better or worse. But in that moment, I realized something that shook me to my core. There was no going back. Once I made this choice, I couldn't unmake it. And that terrified me. The next few days passed in a blur, each moment slipping through my fingers like sand. The more I tried to focus on the work, the less I seemed to understand what I was doing. It was all starting to feel like one big game, one in which I didn't fully know the rules. Or worse, one where I was beginning to forget who I was. Alex's deal loomed over me like a storm cloud. The pressure was becoming unbearable. Every phone call, every meeting, was a step closer to something I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. I had been warned about the cost of success, but now I was realizing just how high that price was. One evening, Rachel called. Her voice was sharper than usual, and I could tell something was off. "Chloe, we need to talk," she said, her tone urgent. "Meet me at the office in an hour." I had no idea what this was about, but I knew it couldn't be good. I arrived at the office and found Rachel pacing back and forth. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes flashing with a mixture of frustration and concern. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the chair in front of her desk. I took a seat and she didn't waste any time. "You're about to make a huge mistake, Chloe," Rachel said, her voice low. "I've been watching you, and I've been trying to protect you from the very thing I'm seeing now. Alex? He's not who you think he is. This isn't about business. It's about control. And once you sign on, you'll be stuck in his game forever." I stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" "He's offering me a chance to prove myself, Rachel. To really make something of myself." She shook her head, her frustration growing. "That's what he wants you to think. It's not about proving yourself. It's about using you to get what he wants. And once you're in, there's no way out. You'll never be in control again." I felt a chill run down my spine. The words she was saying hit me harder than I expected. Was I really about to make this deal with someone who wasn't what he seemed? "You've seen it before," Rachel continued, her voice softer now. "I've been where you are. I made the same mistake. I got caught up in the game, and by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. Don't make the same mistake I did." I didn't know what to say. The offer Alex had made to me seemed like my ticket to everything I had ever wanted: success, power, recognition. But Rachel's words kept echoing in my mind. Was I truly prepared to lose myself in exchange for that? Was it worth it? I left the office that night in a daze, unsure of what to do. I found myself at the same club where Alex had first approached me, sitting at the bar with a drink in my hand. The music played in the background, but it felt hollow, distant. My mind was consumed by the decision I had to make. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Alex. "We need to talk. Meet me tonight at the usual spot. It's time to finalize everything." I stared at the message for a long moment. My heart raced in my chest. Was I ready to make this decision? Was I ready to step into this world of power, money, and control? I could already feel the weight of it all. The cost of success, the sacrifices, the manipulation. It was all starting to settle into my bones. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I could do it. Was this really what I wanted? I took a deep breath and stood up from the bar. My reflection in the mirror above the counter stared back at me, a person I didn't fully recognize anymore. I had to decide. And soon. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. The decision wasn't just about the deal, or the money, or the prestige. It was about who I was willing to become. And in that moment, I made my choice. I would walk away. I texted Rachel, telling her I wasn't going to meet Alex tonight. That I had made a choice. One that wasn't about money or power, but about the person I wanted to be. I had spent too long chasing a version of success that wasn't mine. It was time to take control of my life, to find my own path. The weight on my shoulders lightened as I stepped away from the club, away from Alex, away from everything that had been pulling me into that world. I didn't need to be someone else. I just needed to be me. Thank you for sticking with the story until the end. If you'd like to revisit any part or discuss the next steps, feel free to reach out. I hope you enjoyed it,